This is a HeadGum podcast.
Hello. This is Fake the Nation, where we talk about news, we talk about culture, and where we ready ourselves for the great national gobbling. I'm your host, Negin Farsad, and I just learned, maybe everyone already knew this, that Abraham Lincoln is the dude who made the first official proclamation about Thanksgiving. And this is my favorite little detail, the first ever pumpkin pie recipe to include the crust, so the way the pumpkin pie is as we know it, was published in 1651 by a French chef. What? There's a little Francais. His name was François Pierre La Varenne. So, like the pumpkin pie associated with the most American of holidays is very French, which listeners know I'm a Francophile and I fucking love that. Anyways, today we're gonna talk about some like fun little things in culture, like the fitness gap. We'll also talk about like a cruise that's going around the world designed to make you forget about politics. We'll talk about the world of politics, and so much more. And to do all of that, I am joined by an incredible panel. Again, this is just Andrew, our producer, showing off what he knows to do, which is put together like just the most scintillating panels. We have first up, she's a professor of political science at Fordham. She has a book out that is a must read. It's called How to Build a Democracy, from Fannie Lou Hamer and Barbara Jordan to Stacey Abrams. And I cannot wait to get my hands on it. I had the distinct honor of being on a panel with her at another show recently, and she just wowed audiences. So I'm so excited to have her on. It is the wonderful Christina Greer. Hey, Christina.
Hello there.
We have also with us, you've heard her on the show before, she is an absolute fan favorite. You've seen her on a million things from, for a while now, as is what happens with comedy legends. And she's currently on tour with her Live and Livid tour, which is something you should absolutely go and see. Seeing her live is a treat for the soul. It is the incredible Margaret Cho. Hey, Margaret Cho.
Hey, thank you. Great to be back.
Oh, so happy to have you back. So happy to have you on for the first time, Christina. We will, treat you gently here on Fake the Nation. And before we get into it, I just want to remind listeners that they can go to patreon.com/Negin Farsad to support the show. For as little as $4 a month, you get bonus episodes. And then at $5, you get even more bonus episodes. And then there's other tiers, and there's t-shirts and mugs, and I don't know. There's a lot of stuff and a lot of ways to support. So go to patreon.com/Negin Farsad. Let's get into it with topic number one. So we dipped our feet into the world of culture, and there we found something rather surprising. There is a fitness gap between men and women, and I had never heard about this before. Apparently, women get less exercise than men. Were either of you surprised to hear this?
I wasn't at all.
No? Okay. I don't know why. I was very surprised. Why were you not surprised?
Because I talked to so many different friends of mine who, let's just say you're going on a trip, right? And friends who have kids. I'm happily child-free. Deliberately, I think that there's a whole role for the Black aunt in society. We can get into that in another podcast episode. But so many of my friends are like, their husbands come down. I've seen this in my own family where it's like, I'm ready to go. And everyone else in the family is like, so who's going to pack up the kids? Who's going to get the house ready? Who's going to pack up my own shit? Like all these things. And men just have more time to do things because inherently they kind of think about themselves. And I'm not surprised. I mean, when I was married for a very long time, there were just things in like a management of a household that take time away. The invisible labor, I call it, of just kind of like running the show that so many women have to do, whether it's at work, running to make sure, I'm an academic, my department runs smoothly. Things just kind of happen and no one knows how they happen, but it takes time and energy. And so I think in so many of our careers and our home lives, we are doing this invisible labor, which still takes time away from all this other space that other people have. So unless you're waking up at 5 a.m. or you're being really deliberate, which I'm not always deliberate about, carving off that time for myself to work out. Because I see working out as a chore. I don't see it as like a gift
Fun.
to myself.
Yeah.
Some women see it as like, this is my treat for the day. I actually don't. So if I don't see it as a treat, then it's actually one of the first things that goes away when I have a ton of other stuff to do.
Margaret, you weren't surprised about this fitness gap. Why were you not surprised?
It's just so typical of the gap between the genders that is just like we just always lose, and it's so infuriating again, yet again. I think also it's because exercise is not marketed to women as a treat, as a time for yourself, as a time for wellness. It's marketed to you so you're thinner or you look better.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
it's the approach that we even have as women to the idea of exercise. It's not even for us, it's for how we appear to others or how we conform to society. So it's incredibly infuriating. Also, it's just the safety issue of exercising around men, which something about it brings out this side of them that is highly unpleasant. There's a whole category of viral videos of men bothering women at the gym. It's just like it's like such a common thing. So, and then a lot of the sort of gendered spaces are not as satisfying. I don't know, like curves maybe, or all those spaces. They're not delivering the extent of exercise that me personally I'm want to do. So it's just like you're a lose wherever you go, and it's very infuriating.
Well, it's interesting because they did a study of 400,000 Americans, and only 33% of women met the weekly recommendation for aerobic exercise, compared to 43% of men. So there is that 10% gap. But for the record, everyone's doing terribly on meeting the standards in general. So we're all sort of like shit at getting exercise. And part of the reason I thought that this was a surprising finding to me is I think very much from my personal experience, which is that I mostly take classes. I don't go to a gym. I go to things that start at a certain time, end at a certain time, and they're guided by an instructor. Like that is kind of the only way that I exercise. Because I need the kind of peer pressure or something and the teacher pressure to like do it. Which again, it is for me a chore. It's not me time. It's not like fun. It's like I fucking gotta go do this. You know what I mean? And the classes that I've been going to for years now, I would say they're high intensity interval training. They're like lots of weight training, lots of that. I would consider them like a class that's like that a man would go to. And there are men that go, but it's by and large women that go. And I don't know, maybe that's like, there's something maybe about the class structure that women prefer, and then maybe all these men are at a gym like harassing other women. Again, maybe that's what's happening, and I'm just seeing the fitness world from this narrow lens of classes. But yeah, like I would say like a good 70% of every class is women and 30% is men, and it's always been surprising to me because it's not like a feminine, I mean, I hate to say, but it's not like a feminine class or whatever. Right. It's not like yoga, which has been branded more like, feminine, which is all ridiculous for the record. I know all these words I'm saying right now are ridiculous. But yeah, so the article that we read about this did point to the care for the labor that women do for others. And then also that research shows that women just prioritize other people's health above their own. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And that felt very correct. Yeah. Because I will cancel exercising for other people's health. Like that happens very frequently. I have a daughter, I have a husband, and I'm like, well, if something's going on, or my parents or something, if something's going on with my family, then it's like, well, you know what's getting the axe? It's my fitness class. Right. So that felt very right.
It kind of goes back to like, Susie Orman would always say like, pay yourself first. So like when you get a paycheck, like you put your money in the savings account first and then you pay your bills. And I think that so many women, but I think people in general, don't view exercise, and I'm included, right? Paying myself first. So like the first thing that I should be doing is exercising, and then I get work done. And like, I'm an academic. I sit at my laptop some days for hours if I'm like writing or meetings, podcasts over and over. I mean, I was part of the Peloton craze during lockdown because I was in New York. But before that, I belonged to a gym that I loved, and it had a steam room and it felt luxurious, and I would take classes. But then I found out that their political views, and it was a fancy gym, their political views didn't align with mine. And I felt some kind of way about giving these people $300 a month when I thought they supported individuals and causes that were the antithesis of what I believed in. So I quit the gym, but I didn't have a backup plan. So then I was just kind of out there, you know,
Right.
like letting gravity take its toll and like perimenopause and like a torn tendon in my foot. And here we are. Like now I have to do all this work.
And the interesting thing when we're thinking about like what exercise does for people, like in the long term, obviously women live an average of 6 years longer than men, but they spend a greater percentage of their lives in poor health, you know, with conditions like heart disease and diabetes or whatever. So even though women do live longer, it's like they live longer in a shittier way, which also was surprising to me about about this fitness gap. And increasing your fitness will help bridge that quality of life gap. Yeah. So that's why this whole thing matters. And I have had brunches with my lady friends where I'm like, you guys, we just need to admit to ourselves and God that fucking exercise is now forever. It's not like something we do and it gets skinny and then we're like, look cute for a few minutes and then we have to do it again. Like, it's like we just have to do it because we have to do it because later, so that later on, you know, we can brunch into our 90s, you know?
We're at halftime, like if we're lucky. Yeah. So we got to get on it.
I mean,
I gotta get on it.
I definitely am in it now. My age is like, I hit it for the bone density. It's not about anything else. Like, it's all about trying to stave off osteoporosis and trying to like make sure I can stand and walk, you know, like it's really important. But I was also part of the whole exodus from that particular gym as well. And I miss it too, you know, because there was something the steam room and the eucalyptus towels and I love it.
I would walk around like naked, like just washing my hair, luxuriating.
Can you guys not say the name of that gym?
I didn't even want to advertise for this.
We never said the name.
Okay, that's fine. Okay,
I just donate like the gift shop, the whole thing.
Folks, Google it. I don't know which gym it is.
Oh yeah, we never said the name because I don't want to give them the credit.
Yeah,
I don't want to give them the credit.
Don't go.
They had great eucalyptus towels, but otherwise no credit.
The cold eucalyptus towels in the hot steam room. Oh my god,
so nice. But also, again, like the way that I like to work out there is I like to go to the weight room, and the amount of men who really silently judge the women in there for using the small weights, for like taking up time in the chairs, where they're like sitting on those chairs forever, like on their phone, letting their ball sweat drip all down.
Now here's a question, Margaret. You know, what I found as a woman of color, I love the elliptical machines, right? And there would be 20 elliptical machines, and I would time my gym membership time to when ESPN Sports Center is playing, because I like PTI and I like certain sports shows. So I would always go on the ellipticals. If there are 20 lined up, if I'm on number 2 and numbers 3 through 20 are free, there was always a white man who came and decided to work out at number 3 next to me. Yeah. And I've asked different women of color specifically, like how that is. And they're like, every single time they're on a machine, no matter how many free machines there are, there is a gender and racial dynamic of like white men coming to work out right next to you, so that then you're forced to move to a different machine because they like whatever machine it is. That part actually was infuriating to me, because I was like, I'm here to sweat out kind of the racial gender nonsense that I have to deal with in my whole life. And like at the gym, at this like fancy gym, it's playing out constantly, because I was like, I'm not moving. I was here first, and like this is the TV that I like, this is the remote control that I got to work. Or they would change the TV and I'm like, I'm watching that. Usually the gym etiquette is you ask around, is anybody watching the TV, and then you change it. And so then I'm like, I'm dealing with all this racial politics at the damn gym, and like I'm here to like relax, release. And like it was a lot. It was a lot.
Well, and can I make the case for classes where I think the presence of a teacher mitigates some of that behavior. So, so that's teacher, maybe another reason why I love the classes.
Yeah, as a teacher, I like to take classes because I need to know what it feels like to not be an expert in something and to feel like a novice. So it's like, I've been a professor a really, really long time. I know my script, I know my stuff. But for me, I take classes because it helps me be in the mindset of someone who walks in and doesn't have the confidence to know like all the things that the teacher knows. So it helps me be a more empathetic teacher when I actually take classes. I took some birding classes and I was like the last student. Like I was the worst student in the class. Like everybody knew everything. And I was like, well, is it such and such? And they're like, no. And like everyone was like, oh God, she knows nothing. And I was like, this is helpful for me because there's clearly a kid sitting in my class who feels like everyone knows everything, as does the teacher, and they're just lost. And I was like, this is good for me to be sort of in the last rung every now and again.
Well, folks, let's take a quick break. Let me know. Have you experienced this gender fitness gap, and what do you think of it, and what do you try to do to right that wrong? And when we come back, we'll continue talking. And we are back, and we're ready for topic number 2. Trump wasted no time in announcing his cabinet picks, and in the way that we were all sort of bracing ourselves, I don't think any of us were terribly surprised, but let's focus on a few of them. Here's a sampling. Matt Gaetz for Attorney General, Robert F. Kennedy for Health and Human Services, Tulsi Gabbard for Director of National Intelligence, Marco Rubio for Secretary of State, Pete Hegseth for Secretary of Defense, and the joint leadership of Elon Musk and Vivek Ramaswamy for the Department of Government Efficiency, the dumb acronym of which is DOGE, Musk's cryptocurrency. The man loves a fucking pun,
meme.
like I don't
it's
know,
like meme.
It's so
well, he thinks he's
annoying.
funny.
Yeah,
he thinks he's funny. Like that's the biggest joke. Is he thinks he's hilarious? Which I don't know where he got that impression.
I know, but I don't know. Has this happened to you? I've talked about it on the show before, but this has probably happened to you, Margaret, right? Where this has happened to me many times. A very wealthy man of any race will come up to me and be like, I always thought I'd be good at stand-up.
Oh yeah.
That happens to you, right? And every time I'm okay, well, if you're serious, we can have a serious conversation about how you might achieve your dreams, but it will involve eating a lot of shit, because you're probably not good at you know what I mean? Probably not that good. It takes a long time anyway, and it's such a strange, and he if Elon, if you're listening, I know he's a huge listener. I would say you need to commit 3 minutes of material and go onto paper, and then go to an open mic, tell no one, and record yourself, and really listen to it afterwards and see if anyone laughed. And that's when start to realize some things.
Mm-hmm. Well, rich people also always think they're good at a lot of things.
Yeah.
Just because you're good at either making money or getting money from your dad. I mean, Elon has failed every company that he's ever had. So he's not good at a lot of things. I'm always fascinated about rich people who are immediately they want to just redo education. I'm in education.
That's
they're
so
really
popular.
into charter schools, and it's education's broken. It's but you know nothing about education. Just because you have money doesn't mean that you're good at everything. And I think we're seeing the march of just such incompetent people, one after the other.
Yeah.
I don't know how we walk it back.
I mean, so I guess Margaret, of these names, which is the most I don't know, upsetting to you?
Pete Hegseth.
Okay.
Because he has never washed his hands. He doesn't believe in germs, which would probably qualify him for health secretary. But he is they're trying to vet him now, and he has one sexual assault allegation against him.
Yeah.
If he wants to stay in Trump's cabinet, he's going to need a lot lot more of those. He's going to need at least
a minimum requirement.
Right.
Yes.
The quorum is 12.
Please. I mean, who are we? All of them are just ludicrous. Whatever. I mean, RFK, really? You have one case of documented monkeypox now in Southern California. So we're basically going to maybe manage another pandemic under him very quickly. I mean, somebody who's anti-vaccine, who wants to sell this idea of raw, unpasteurized milk. Pasteurization exists for a reason. There's things that are there for a reason. Vaccines exist for a reason.
Yeah. Can I say about the unpasteurized milk thing? So I think I was on an episode of Wait, Don't Tell Me with Anthony Fauci. And we were hanging out in the green room having a chat, and he was like, we were sort of just asking him questions like what worries you now and stuff like that. And the man is not in government. I think he's working at a university. And he's just like, well, one of the things that's worrying me right now is this trend about unpasteurized milk. And we're like, yeah, so what's the big deal there? And he was like, well, avian bird flu has been changing in nature, and one of the ways that it survives is in unpasteurized milk. So then you could be drinking avian bird flu. He was like, so don't do that. Please don't do that. You know what I mean? And we were all like, yeah, got it. No unpasteurized milk. That sounds terrible. I don't want to drink avian bird flu. And so, but that's the risk. And I think people don't understand the risks, involved, because people like RFK don't want to talk about the risks. And then I think what's confusing about someone like RFK is there's some things that he says that sound like great. You know, he says like I want to introduce some of the European food restrictions, like the red dye or whatever that they're now banning in California. That he wants to do some of that, and it's like, as a parent, well, that sounds great. I don't want those carcinogens in the food supply in the United States. That sounds great. So then he says some reasonable things that attract people, and that sort of like sane wash the crazy things, you know what I mean? So I think that's that makes those things scary. Christina, who are you the most afraid of on this list?
Oh God, there's so many. I mean, I do think RFK as the health czar really does worry me. You know, I just put something in the chat about, you know, him going to Samoa and then this measles outbreak occurs and like they'll never be right. Because we know that we are at risk for more global pandemics. We are a global society. You know, the fact that there's so many people with sexual abuse accusations or confirmations just lets us know that we are dealing with an entire administration that has zero shame. And to have the highest leaders in our government just being like a cesspool of degenerates. You know, I'm actually worried about who the transportation secretary will be.
It's going to be Caitlyn Jenner.
I mean, just I mean, like it's the level of incompetence is like, listen, women of color, like, you can't tell us nothing because we're sitting here looking at this. But, you know, as someone who lives in cities, who cares deeply about cities, I care about cities because people of color live in cities. If you look at the electoral map, all states are red states. It's just, do you have enough blue cities in your red state to change it from blue to red every 4 years? And so the disdain that this administration has for people of color and therefore cities, because people of color live in cities, lets me know that they will drain our transportation budgets. And that, I you know, I do a lot with transportation. That's kind of like my side thing. But someone's ability to move freely about their own city is a civil right to me. And so we're going to jack up the price of transportation because the larger agencies are going to be starved. And then, you know, people are going to have to rely on cars or other modes of transportation in ways that aren't going to have great health benefits for poor communities. So like the rippling effects, we still don't know the damage that Trump did from his first administration. We're just now starting to see it where they're recalling food because it's like, oh, well, we have all these lax, you know, rules from the first time he was here. We're going to have even more the second time around. And I really worry about like the environmental consequences of some of his picks. I mean, the Department of Defense, the fact that you have like this highly qualified Black 4-star general and all Trump can see is like, oh, that's a DEI hire. I was like, he's a 4-star general in the U.S. Army. Like, he's not.
You don't get to 4
he's
stars.
Not a rando. He's not a Fox News host who's 44 years old who's just like, hey, I like Trump.
I think part of it is that Trump is trying to disgust so many people who are legitimately like there and doing a good job underneath them with these nominations that they leave. So you have a mass exodus. Like we all left that gym. They're all going to leave their appointed positions because they can't serve under this pick. Yeah, Matt Gaetz or Hepseth or was it Tom Homan, who I think is the worst. The borders are who wants to just deport whole families.
Yeah, he thought family separation was not a big deal.
No,
he thought it was fine, a fine policy.
Well, I mean, or you have Mike Huckabee, who's like, I don't understand, what is Palestine? There's no such thing as that.
He doesn't, or he doesn't believe it needs to exist.
No,
that's his field message.
But this is what so many political scientists / women of color / Black women explicitly were trying to tell people. And it's like, the Democratic Party may not be ideal, but Black people are inherently not accustomed to getting our best option. We have never gotten 100% of what we wanted. So it's like, so what is the strategy to try and maximize the most that you can get? And it's like, if I'm going to be in opposition, I'd rather be in opposition to a Democratic regime where I can say, I'm going to push you. Yeah, I feel like you're moving a little to the center, but I'm going to push you back to the left. Like, I can actually negotiate with you. You can't negotiate with a man with no shame. You can't negotiate with a man who has told you that he sees people as less than human. You can't negotiate with a man who has a very specific vision of who he thinks is deserving to be under the title of American. And like the first order of business in 2017, when he got inaugurated, first order of business, an executive order for a Muslim ban. I'm just going to choose some random countries and try and kick all these people out and make sure that they don't come in. Like, he's already, I always say the first term was case in the joint. It was a smash and grab.
Yeah,
This time, it's a much more methodical dismantling. And as Margaret laid out, it's like making sure anybody who would have a remote lever of a break to say, I think this is a bridge too far. As problematic as Jeff Beauregard Sessions was, he at least was like, this is a bridge too far. Right. Even Bill Barr was like, yeah, not going to do. Even Mike Pence was like, I'm not going to sign on to some stuff.
And I think Marco Rubio of the list that I laid out is the most kind of like reasonable person, you know, and he is a huge Trump fanatic now. You know what I mean?
They're all sick of
but in that list, he seems okay. Well, all right. Marco Rubio seems, I guess, kind of reasonable. I think part of the part of the strategy here too is I'm going to put so many crazy names out there that it will be very hard for them to reject all of them. Right. So then it becomes this like, all right, well, which you pick your one or two that
do we
you'll
pick the
reject.
Florida senator who has $1 million in debt that just magically disappeared, or do we pick the Florida congressman who is possibly sleeping with underage girls? Who knows?
Right.
Like,
and exactly. And so then there's it makes it's such an interesting. Like, it's sort of like going to the cereal aisle and there being too many choices and you're like, I just won't buy any. And I feel like this is like the same thing of like, oh my God, there's so many crazy choices. I guess we'll let all of them through. Like, it's like, that's
but for me,
strategy.
It's like, Elizabeth Warren, I just recently left Twitter. I was like, I don't need you, Elizabeth Warren, tweeting like, oh my God, this is crazy. This person's, hey girl, that's your job to block the crazy. Like, I'm not a senator. I can't confirm them. But what I am paying you to do is to make sure that you organize the Democrats and some half-sane Republicans to make sure these folks don't get in. And if he tries to do recess appointments, that you are ready for the battle. I actually don't need you on Twitter telling me that this is the crazy train. Like, the fact that RFK Jr., and Trump loves the fact that he's like from a Democratic family, and so now he's on his side. But it's like the fact that you can get this man who has said, like, fast food is poison, here are all the things that are happening, and you get him whether you ate the Big Mac or not. But you get this man in a photo op with fries, a Coke, and a Big Mac. All that symbolizes to me is how quickly Donald Trump and his ilk can get people who were once against him on his side and just becoming sycophants so quickly. None of these men have spines. They're so feckless. They're shameless. And so if we are all on this crazy train, one for me is like protecting my peace, protecting my sanity, to not follow it like incessantly the way we did the first time around and drive my blood pressure up and send me to an early grave because these white boys are going to be okay. But to recognize that, like, this is the power of local politics. We have to stop some of these people, some of the politicians, not the randos from the street, but like, the governor of North Dakota, a problem. Lee Zeldin from New York, where I am, a problem. Like, these people should have been cut off at the pass at much lower levels, but then they get to a certain point and now they're elevated even higher.
Ooh,
so, like,
I like that. So, like, local government should be where everyone gets tested and they don't weed it out.
And we don't weed them out. And then
we don't weed them
out. A city
out.
council member becomes a state legislator.
Right.
The legislator becomes a member of the House. Member of the House becomes a senator.
And part of that is that
we're
not excited about local politics the way we used to be. And so we kind of are letting more of these, more of the crazies through, which leads me to my next topic in politics, which is about back to the Democrats. We've been looking back at voting patterns, and it looks like the DC Kamala won the DC suburbs as she was expected to do, but Biden won them by so much more. So it indicates a rightward shift in the suburbs, where we thought the kind of educated class of suburbanites were a stronghold for Democrats. But even that, we weren't able to retrain at the same level. And part of the philosophy here is that the school battles, the school board battles about transgender kids' access to bathrooms and sports, and about how to teach the nation's history and race, and all the frustrations about schools being closed during the pandemic, all of that stuff taken together created this sort of rightward shift with those voters. Margaret, do you think that the school board stuff has been national news, even though it's a local problem, but a lot of these have made national news. Do you think the school board stuff kind of created a negative, view of the Democratic Party?
I think so, but also, what's so downplayed in this whole election is misogynoir. It is really that they don't want a Black woman to be in charge, and doesn't matter how incredibly qualified she is, Doesn't matter that she's worked in all three branches of government. Doesn't matter that she's been vice president in a very, very successful administration. They would like, to me, it's just that we're not calling out the obvious problem. It's misogynoir, and it's so infuriating. It also, they keep saying it's a landslide. It's not a landslide. 1% is not a landslide. It's basically.
Yeah, I push back on landslide. That's it's very ridiculous to me, that statement.
He won by the load in his diaper put him over the edge. Like that was the only thing. But yeah, all of these totally made up battles, like trans people in the bathroom, like that is a made up thing. Like that was it
from the right.
From the right,
more.
Representative Mace. She said that now in the state capitol that she's going to like ban transgender women from the bathroom after Sarah McBride was elected, the first transgender person elected to Congress, and it makes me so mad. I hope she gets finger blasted by Pete Hegseth and gets the worst antibiotic resistant case of a UTI that's ever happened.
Oh, that's a very, very specific hex that you put on her. I will say, like, I didn't have a kid in school during the pandemic. She was a baby during the pandemic, so I'm quite lucky about that. But like, I will say one thing about school closures, that even my most liberal friends who had kids in school during the pandemic were losing their minds, and the problem with the school closures, right or wrong, was that a lot of kids are now still seeing the effects, especially depending on the age group. And so it's something that the parents can't move beyond because they're still having to deal with it, right? And so when we're talking about, like, if you strongly believe there was a better way for schools to remain open, and we as democratic cities and suburbs didn't do that, I mean, I can see that frustration. I can see that frustration. I wouldn't vote for Republican or Trump at all, like, based on that frustration, but I can at least understand it. Christina, what do you think of the school board thing?
I think that it was millions upon hundreds of millions of dollars that Republicans spent to make it an issue that's a non-issue. I mean, like, when we think about sort of like trans in sports, it's like 0.0000001% of what is happening. And so we know that Republican far-right folks spent a lot of money doing scare tactics. If you don't have policies that people agree with and that are going to move the country forward, all you do is start with a fear tactic. So the first one was, all these immigrant kids are going to come and take over your schools and everything's going to be Spanish. You remember back in the day, that was like the big ESL debate.
Oh yeah,
right?
yeah.
All of a sudden your kids aren't going to be able to speak English because all the kids in school are going to be speaking a different language and blah, blah, blah. That was like millions of dollars a few years ago. That's more like the Bush years, right? And then we move on and sort of, there's been a lot of money put into like homeschooling. So a lot of parents are like, it's too dangerous, but homeschool. Right? Never attacking the issue that guns, that Republicans refuse to deal with. It's like, oh, let's have clear backpacks, and like, what about not guns? So then that sort of is another issue.
Yeah.
Again, no solutions, no real solutions. And then the biggest thing now that was really helpful for a lot of, and this goes to Margaret's point, for a lot of people who want to hide behind the fact that they don't want to vote for a woman of color at the top of the ticket, it's like, well, I can't support the Democrats. They've just gone far too left with this woke agenda. And I'm just really worried about my daughter playing against someone in her softball team who's like a boy who says he's a girl and she could get hurt. Girl, if you don't just say you don't want to vote for this black woman, because guess what? The odds of your child ever playing with someone who's a trans student is like so infinitesimal. But the fact that Republicans spend so much money scaring the hell out of parents, thinking that, like, God forbid their kids would go to school with a trans kid, it's like, it's not even mind-boggling, because we know that if Bell Hooks is correct, which we know she is, with this country is based on white supremacy, anti-black racism, patriarchy, and capitalism, you look at sort of, what Fannie Lou Hamer and Martin Luther King all warned us about, kind of this middle-of-the-road Democrat that can be easily swayed by this Republican rhetoric, and we see it. And we know that the third rail in all these conversations that's unspoken is always education, right? Integration of education, Brown v. Board, 1954. My mom never went to school with a white person, not because she didn't want to, because she wasn't allowed to, right? We know that, the rise of personal pools is because people didn't want to have black kids in the pool together. I mean, like, every single policy, every single thing in this country is based on racism, not race, but racism. So like, why do you have a personal pool? Because they shut down public pools when they were integrated. You know, why do we have like the rise of charter schools or parochial schools, which I went to, or private schools? It's because people don't want their kids to go to school with, you know, colored kids when schools were integrated. I mean, my dad tells this funny story. He integrated Miami Central High School in 1961. He, another black guy, and a Chinese kid, 1,200 white students. They walk up to the front steps the first day of school. The Chinese kid, I think his name is Howie Chin, looks at my dad and says, "We black folks need to stick together." Because in 1961, you were either black or white. And at the time, Chinese people were in the black category because there were no extra categories. And so the idea of education is always going to be the center sort of guiding light for a lot of voters when they go into that booth privately. And Republicans, time and time again, like I think vividly about second term George Bush, doing this brilliant job of scaring so many white Americans, and now Americans of color, into what will it look like if your kids go to school with like the undeserving kids. And so in New York, it's, you know, the migrant kids or, you know, immigrant kids. And you have people voting against their interests, as LBJ told us, time and time again, because of the fear of this boogeyman. And you're distracted and deflected into thinking about the immigrants and the migrants and not looking at the billionaire who's sitting next to the president-elect, who's going to be making all of the decisions about what you do with your life and your kids.
Folks, let me know, did the school board stuff happen in your area? Was it a big deal? Do you feel like it drove neighbors into voting against the Democratic Party? I'm so curious. All right, we are going to move on to topic number 3. And this is a quickie because it's maybe just totally silly. I don't know. There's a new cruise that's offering to take you around the globe in an effort to avoid politics for 4 years. It's called the Skip Forward package, as in skip forward 4 years. A single occupancy room would cost you $255,999. But I should note that the neurovirus would be free. Now, what do you think of taking a 4-year avoidance cruise?
I think it's valid. Although I would rather. I mean, you got to be here to fight. You know, the thing is that even though we don't have it, we have 2 years until the next sort of like you know, elections. We still have to fight. We still have to figure out how to protest. Who knows what exactly that's going to look like with Trump engaging martial law and shooting and arresting protesters or whatever, you know, or dismantling nonprofit organizations, whatever it is. We have to figure out how that protest is going to go. I mean, I think that we have our work cut out for us, and we have to really make sure that this doesn't get worse. This is bad, and it is worse than before, but it can get way worse if we don't actually pay attention. And, you know, I'm sure that Trump is going to try to keep on going, but he also realistically doesn't have that many years left on this earth, really, you know, as an old person. And the one that I don't think RFK is taking away his McDonald's. So he's eaten that all the way into that grave. So, you know, we have to make sure that it's not Don Jr. or JD Vance next time around. And we have to figure it out. So, you know, go if you need to, but I would prefer to have you here.
I like that. I would, I would also prefer to have you here. Christina, what do you think?
I mean, listen, I believe in staying and fighting. I mean, my ancestors built this country free of charge, by the way. So I'm not quick to abandon it. I do think that we have to pay attention, like, because what I think the second election showed a lot of folks is that it's actually not about Donald Trump. It's actually about an ideology that he represents, and he's excavated. So even when he's out of the running, there are other people who could come into his place. And so that's what we need to fight and make sure that, like, there's some hard feelings, like, I'm gonna be real, right? And so, like, we need to rest and we need to recharge and we need to go through the 7 stages of grief, but like, we need to figure out what the coalitions look like, because I've always, I mean, I literally wrote a book called Black Ethnics right there, where I was just like, a lot of immigrants are like ripe for the picking with these Republican talking points, you know, whether it's economic, whether it's social, whether it's thinking who's deserving. And we, you know, all been with immigrant communities where it's like, I'm in, let me pull up this ladder. And there are a lot of people who feel very empowered by, now that they're in the front door, they want to shut the door to make sure no one else gets in after them. You can look at like Latino voters in Arizona as some of that data. So I think Democrats just have to figure out what the messaging is. It's like, stop chasing these white boys who left before Carter. They're not coming back. Who cares? Like the white working class, they vote against their interests. LBJ told us about it. You give them somebody to look down on, they will consistently vote against their own interests. I don't understand why we're still chasing them. They left. They left now 40 some odd years ago. So maybe we want to figure out a way to like build real coalitions without chasing these white boys who left. Like, okay, we get it. It's sad. They're gone. Figure out how to make sure you get young people, right? And not in the Obama style of like, I get young people, they vote for me, I lose 1,200 state house seats and I don't think about it. And I only build a coalition for me for 2 election cycles. But like, what does the future of the party look like? And so that's where my smoke for the Obamas comes in. Cause I'm like, either you guys are in politics or you're out. Stop coming in, putting your thumb on the scale and saying,
okay, you don't like them dipping toes.
Either you're making money in Hollywood or you're in politics. But like, stop coming in saying, I want this person, I want that person. And then you get what you want. And then you bounce. You started making movies on Netflix. Good for you. You guys earned it. You did 8 perfect years. I'll give you that. Make all the money you want. Have all the houses you want. But if you're going to be in Hollywood, be in Hollywood. If you're going to be in politics and helping to shape the future of the Democratic Party, then you guys got to be in DC or wherever, helping to shape the future of the Democratic Party. Don't keep putting your thumb on the scale where we have to sort of like build this weirdo coalition around 2008 politics. It's not working in 2024. So like that to me is my frustration, because we have this like fragmented, it's sort of, you know what it looks like? I don't know if you guys watch sports, but like if you ever watch the Lakers when like they're in a jam and they go to the sidelines and the coach is like, okay, Margaret, Negin, like, here's what we're doing. And LeBron's like, shh, here's what we need to do. And so you see like the players like looking at the coach and looking at LeBron and looking at the coach, and they don't know like, who to pay attention to, because it's like, do I listen to LeBron who's like on the floor, or do I listen to the coach? Who's the coach? And I feel like the DNC is sort of like, okay, so here's what I think we should do. And Obama's like, no, here's the game plan. And like the Democrats are like, well, I don't know who we listen to because he was super successful. It's like 20 years ago. 20 years ago, he was super successful.
It was a while ago.
So we got a boogie.
I'm up too much. First of all, about like specifically taking an avoidance cruise, I think about my parents' generation, and I'm like, they did so much, and I'm like, if they want to like go away from all of this stuff, that's great. You know what I mean? Like, I get it, and that's cool, and
4 years.
But I mean, I can't imagine. First of all, I'm motion sick, so cruises are just a non-starter for me to begin with.
I get such bad seasickness. It wouldn't be fun.
Yeah,
it's not happening. I did a 6-day cruise, and I was like, that was for work too, and I was like, this is enough.
No.
I don't picture myself like really enjoying it, but I feel like, okay, if you're of a certain age and you want to spend some of your like golden years that way, like that's totally
great,
fine.
yeah.
And also and then they can do that. There's expat communities all over the world of like old, Americans, and that's fantastic. But I would say in terms of like not avoiding it, I also like want there to be a narrative around it that isn't like, this is a slog. Like, I do think the better way to build like a lasting party that is unified, that feels good, that has the right strategy, is that it's also kind of like fun to be in the community of it. And I think we've been, as Democrats, like really, everything's been very negative, rightfully so, because we're dealing with such monsters. But like, also, we have to figure out a way that attracts more, because I don't know that the negativity does that anymore. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And right now, the negativity is just making people turn off the news, and that's what they're doing, and as opposed to getting engaged. And so I feel like there should be something about the Democratic Party that feels like a party with your neighbors, and that trying to get people elected feels like a party. That's when Kamala came on the scene, we had that moment where it was like energetic and fun, and like we're wearing the American flag again. It felt patriotic in like a great way. And that's like the spirit I think we need to be tapping into to kind of get people to give a shit so that the fight doesn't feel like a slog.
Yeah.
A slog is not going to help us win.
Right.
Yeah.
All right, folks. That's the end of the show. I want to thank both of you for being on the show. What a wonderful conversation. I would love for the people of Faith Nation to be able to find you and all the wonderful things that you do. Christina, where do they do that?
Instagram. I left that other site, and I made my login before I understood how social media worked. So it's dr_CM Greer.
Follow her. She's so smart, if you couldn't tell from this podcast, and she will help you through these troubled times. Margaret Cho, where do they find you?
Instagram, Margaret_Cho, and I'm on tour, so come see me. MargaretCho.com is where you get tickets.
Guys, like I said, do yourself a favor and get those tickets. You know where to find me and all things that I do. I want to thank Andrew McGuire, our wonderful producer. Thanks to everyone at HeadGum. Thanks to Gaby Alter for our theme music. If you have any questions or ideas, you can email us at fakethenationpodcast@gmail.com. And otherwise, we'll be back in your earballs next week.
That was a HeadGum podcast.